There exists in every trial a divine whisper, a voice that speaks through the storm, calling us to trust in the unseen. Too often we see suffering as a cruel interruption to life's journey, an unwanted detour. But in truth it is the road itself, the very path upon which God leads us to his richest blessings. You see, the hand of God is not idle in our affliction. When pain knocks at the door, heaven is already preparing the feast of restoration. The trials you face are not meaningless. They are the brushstrokes of a greater masterpiece, woven into a divine tapestry you cannot yet perceive. Imagine for a moment a seed buried beneath the earth. To the eye, it seems forgotten, swallowed in darkness. But beneath the surface, a miracle is unfolding. The pressure, the breaking, the waiting, all necessary for the seed to rise, to stretch towards the heavens and bear fruit. So it is with your trials. What appears as loss is often preparation. What feels like delay is divine alignment. The furnace of affliction is never pleasant, yet it is the place where faith is forged. Like gold tested in fire, your faith is being purified, strengthened, and made ready for what lies ahead. Do not resist the refining. God is not merely restoring what was lost, he is preparing you for what is far greater. Do you remember Joseph? Betrayed, imprisoned, abandoned, yet in the end exalted. What his brothers meant for evil, God turned for good. The prison was not the end of his story, it was the place where his character was shaped for the palace. So it is with you. The very trials that seek to break you are the tools God uses to build you. But perhaps the greatest blessing in suffering is this: it draws us nearer to the heart of God. When all else is stripped away, when comfort fails and human wisdom falters, we find ourselves before him, fully dependent, fully surrendered. And it is there, in that sacred place of trust, that the greatest blessings are revealed. The hidden hand of providence moves silently through our lives, often unnoticed, often misunderstood. We stand in the middle of trials, bewildered, asking, where is God in this? We assume that his presence must mean immediate deliverance, that if he truly loved us, suffering would never touch our doorstep. But what if the very thing we wish to escape is the vessel of his greatest work? There is a story being written beyond what we can see. God is never absent, never idle. His ways are higher than ours, his thoughts beyond our comprehension. What we perceive as chaos is, in truth, divine orchestration. Every setback, every disappointment, every heartbreak, none of it is wasted in his hands. We are so quick to measure the goodness of God by our present comfort, yet he measures it by eternity. He is shaping, molding, refining us into something glorious. Consider Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. From every human perspective, his life seemed like a series of misfortunes, a tragic story of betrayal and loss. Yet behind the scenes, the hidden hand of providence was at work. The very betrayal that sought to destroy him was the means by which he was positioned for greatness. The prison was not a dead end, but a passageway to the palace. God had not abandoned him, he was preparing him, and so it is with us. We may not understand the suffering we endure. We may feel lost in the waiting, unsure of how our pain fits into the plan, but if we trust in the unseen hand of God, we will one day look back and see the beauty of what he was doing all along. The prayers that seemed unanswered, the delays that felt like denials, the doors that closed, each one was a piece of the puzzle, leading us towards something far greater than we imagined. When we cannot see his hand, we must trust his heart. God does not abandon his children. He is not distant, nor is he indifferent to our suffering. Even in the darkest moments, he is weaving together a story of redemption, and in time we will see that what we thought was a burden was, in fact, a blessing in disguise. There is something mysterious about suffering, something that presses against our understanding of a loving and sovereign God. We cry out for relief, yet the weight remains. We long for deliverance, yet the trial lingers. It is in these moments that we begin to question, if God is good, why must we endure such pain? But what if the very thing we wish to escape is the tool he uses to transform us? Gold cannot shine in its raw form. It must pass through the fire, through intense heat, before it is refined and purified. Likewise, faith that is untested remains weak and incomplete. It is in the furnace of affliction that we are shaped into something far greater than we ever imagined. We often ask God to take away our trials, but He, in His wisdom, allows them to remain, not to harm us, but to refine us. Look at the great figures of faith throughout history. None of them became who they were without walking through fire. Joseph had to endure betrayal and imprisonment before he was fit to lead a nation. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he was ready to deliver God's people. Even David, anointed as king, spent years fleeing for his life before he took the throne. What if their suffering had been removed too soon? What if the process had been cut short? They would not have been prepared for the calling God had for them. And so it is with us. We ask God to remove the burden, but He knows that the burden is building something within us. He sees what we cannot, the strength being developed, the faith being deepened, the wisdom being cultivated. Pain is never purposeless in the hands of God. It is through suffering that we learn endurance, through waiting that we learn trust, through trials that we learn the depths of His grace. Many will say they desire a deeper relationship with God, but they do not realize that intimacy with Him often comes through suffering. When all else is stripped away, when we have nothing left to hold on to, we find Him in a way we never have before. The furnace of affliction is painful, but it is also holy. It is there that we are made new. If you are in the fire today, do not lose heart. The same God who allowed the trial will use it for your good. The pain is not the end of your story, it is the shaping of it. And in time, when the fire has done its work, you will emerge not broken, but strengthened, not defeated, but victorious. The very thing that sought to destroy you will become the testimony of how God sustained you. And you will see that the fire was never meant to consume you, but to refine you for the blessing that awaits. We often find ourselves struggling with the silence of God, wondering why He delays in answering our prayers, in lifting our burdens, in bringing the breakthrough we so desperately seek. Our hearts grow weary in the waiting, and doubt creeps in like a shadow. Does He not hear? Does He not care? But what we see as delay is, in truth, divine timing. What we perceive as silence is often God working in ways beyond our comprehension. Throughout Scripture, we see this truth unfold time and again. Abraham was promised a son, yet years passed before Isaac was born. Joseph dreamed of greatness, yet he spent years in a prison cell before his purpose was revealed. The Israelites cried out for deliverance, but their exodus came only in God's appointed time. Even Jesus, the Son of God, was not revealed to the world until the fullness of time had come. Why does God make us wait? Because His timing is perfect and ours is flawed. We see only the present, He sees the full picture. We long for immediate relief, but He is preparing something greater than we can imagine. What if the blessing arrived too soon? What if the answer came before we were ready to receive it? We often assume that waiting is wasted time, but in reality it is preparation. God is not only aligning circumstances, He is aligning our hearts. When we rush ahead of Him, we risk missing the fullness of what He desires to give us. But when we trust His timing, we find that His plans are always greater than our own. Waiting is not a sign of abandonment, it is a sign of His careful, loving orchestration. The seasons of delay are not without purpose. They teach us patience, deepen our faith, and strip away the illusion that we are in control. If you find yourself in a season of waiting, do not despair. The very delay that troubles you now may be the safeguard that prepares you for greater blessings. What seems like silence is the careful unfolding of His divine plan. In time, when the waiting has fulfilled its purpose, you will see that He was never late. He was right on time. And when the answer comes, you will understand that the waiting was never empty, but filled with His unseen hand guiding you towards something far greater than you had imagined. Faith is not merely believing when the path is clear. It is trusting when the road is dark, when answers are absent, when trials press upon the soul like a weight too heavy to bear. It is easy to speak of faith when life is comfortable, when prayers are swiftly answered, and when blessings flow without hindrance. But true faith is tested in the storm, in the wilderness, in the moments when all we have left is the choice to believe that God is still working even when we cannot see how. Faith is the bridge between trial and blessing, the unseen hand that reaches beyond hardship and grasps hold of the promises of God. It does not ignore suffering, nor does it dismiss the pain of waiting, but it refuses to let those things be the final word. It looks beyond what is immediate and holds fast to what is eternal. Many lose heart in suffering because they judge their circumstances by what they feel in the moment. But faith reminds us that our present struggles are not the conclusion of our story. God is still writing, and his ending is always redemption. Consider Peter stepping onto the water. The waves were fierce, the wind howled, and every human instinct told him that sinking was inevitable. But faith was not found in the logic of the moment, it was found in trusting the one who called him forward. The moment Peter fixed his eyes on the storm rather than on Christ, he began to sink. So it is with us. When we fix our eyes on hardship, fear takes hold. But when we fix our eyes on God, faith lifts us above what would otherwise drown us. Faith does not demand immediate understanding. It rests in the truth that God's ways are higher than ours. It does not wait for all the answers before trusting. It steps forward, even when the path is uncertain. And in that faith, trials become a passage, not a prison. They become the very soil from which blessings will grow. If you are standing in the middle of hardship, hold fast to faith. The storm does not define you. The struggle is not the end. And if you dare to trust him, you will find that what was meant to break you will be the very thing God uses to bring you into his greater purpose. We often measure blessings by what we can see, by what feels good and brings immediate joy. But God's blessings do not always come in the form of comfort, ease, or abundance. Sometimes they come wrapped in difficulty, in seasons of waiting, in paths we would have never chosen for ourselves. It is only when we look back that we begin to realize that what once seemed like loss was actually divine preparation for something far greater. Think of Joseph, thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. Every step of his journey looked like a setback, another door closing, another disappointment. Yet, in the grand design of God, each hardship was a necessary step toward his ultimate purpose. Had he not been betrayed, he would not have been sold. Had he not been sold, he would not have entered Potiphar's house. Had he not been falsely accused, he would not have been imprisoned. And had he not been imprisoned, he would not have stood before Pharaoh to be exalted as ruler over Egypt. What appeared to be a series of tragedies was, in reality, the unfolding of a divine plan. This is the way of God. What we perceive as loss is often his way of making room for something greater. The job you lost may be the thing that leads you to your true calling. The relationship that ended may be what frees you for a greater purpose. The closed door you grieved over may be the very thing that redirects you toward a future you never imagined. God is not in the business of taking without giving. He removes what is lesser to give what is greater. But in the moment, we struggle to see it. We cling to what we had, unable to comprehend why it was taken. We question, we doubt, we wonder if he is even listening. Yet, if we trust him, if we surrender even in our pain, we will come to see that his plan is never for our harm, but always for our good. The loss you grieve today may be the very thing that opens the door to your greatest blessing. In time, you will understand that what was meant for harm, God has turned for good. And you will stand as living proof that his ways are always higher, his plans always greater. We often view trials as obstacles, painful interruptions to the life we envisioned. When hardships come, we ask, why me? Why now? What did I do to deserve this? But what if our struggles are not meaningless? What if every difficulty, every heartbreak, and every unanswered prayer is shaping us for something eternal, something far beyond what we can see in this moment? God does not allow suffering without purpose. He is not indifferent to our pain, nor does he take pleasure in our struggles. Yet he allows trials because he sees beyond the present moment. He sees what we are becoming. The pain we endure is not wasted. It is the very tool he uses to refine our character, deepen our faith, and draw us closer to him. What seems unbearable now will one day be revealed as part of a much greater story. Think of Paul, who suffered imprisonment, beatings, shipwrecks, and countless trials. From a human perspective, his life could have been seen as one hardship after another. Yet Paul himself declared, "Our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory, that far outweighs them all. He understood that his struggles were not in vain. They were producing something eternal, something far greater than the pain of the moment. This is the truth we must cling to in our own trials. Every tear, every unanswered question, every moment of suffering is being woven into a tapestry that we cannot yet see. The trials that seek to break us are, in God's hands, the very things that shape us into who we are meant to be. Our struggles strip away our illusions of control and draw us into deeper reliance on Him. If we were never tested, how would we learn endurance? If we never face storms, how would we know the strength of our foundation? If life was always easy, would we ever truly seek God? It is in our struggles that our faith becomes real, that we move beyond words and into a deep, unshakable trust in the one who holds our future. So, if you are walking through hardship, take heart. Your suffering is not wasted. It is doing something within you, preparing you, shaping you for something beyond this moment. One day you will look back and see that what you thought was meant to destroy you was actually a stepping stone to your greatest testimony. And in that moment, you will know that God was with you all along, turning even your pain into something beautiful for His glory. There will come a day when you will look back on the trials that once brought you to your knees and see them not as moments of defeat, but as the very path that led you to God's greatest blessings. What you thought was the breaking of your life was, in reality, the making of your faith. Every hardship, every closed door, every painful season was not a sign of God's absence, but a mark of His divine hand at work, preparing, refining, and strengthening you for something far greater than you ever imagined. God does not waste suffering. He does not allow trials without purpose. He is the master craftsman, turning,